Laudetur Jesus Christus. Vatican and World News.
Today, Friday, December 18th, the Church remembers the Old Testament prophet, Saint Malachi. And these are today's headlines. Pope Francis emphasizes the contribution of religions to building a more just and fraternal world. The bishops of the European Union call for more dialogue on COVID safety measures, especially those affecting religion. And Nigerian Archbishop Ignatius Kaigama welcomes news of the release of kidnapped victims. In the Vatican, I'm Christopher Wells. Our top story this afternoon, greeting German-speaking theology students on Friday in the Vatican, Pope Francis underlined the important contribution of religions in building a fraternal and just world. Lydia O'Kane has this report.
Due to the coronavirus pandemic, German-speaking students who were supposed to be taking part in a theological study year at the Abbey of Dormition of the Blessed Virgin Mary in Jerusalem were unable to attend. So instead of going to the Holy Land, 30 students were hosted by the Pontifical Athenaeum Sant'Anselmo in Rome. This change of plan also meant that on Friday they were able to meet the Pope in the Vatican. Greeting the students, Pope Francis told them that this study year is an opportunity for Catholic and Protestant theology students to learn about biblical sites and meet with the Eastern churches as well as Jewish and Islamic worlds. Even if you cannot experience the Holy Land this year, he continued, ecumenism and interreligious dialogue will always remain a distinctive feature of your programme. The Pope stressed that as students of theology, they were witnesses for their peers and for men and women of today to the importance of God in their lives and to the fullness which a lived faith brings. It will be your task to enter into dialogue with a world where there seems to be less and less room for religion. It is a task that we share with all believers of different religions, knowing that making God present is good for our societies, he said. Quoting from his recent encyclical, Fratelli Tutti, Pope Francis underlined that as believers we are convinced that religions make an important contribution to building fraternity and defending justice in society. On the other hand, we believe that when for various reasons people want to oust God from society, they end up worshipping idols and man soon goes astray. The Pope expressed the hope that the students' theological study year would contribute to their formative spiritual and human journey. Finally, looking ahead to Christmas, Pope Francis recalls that, in spirit, we will all be pilgrims at the Grotto of Bethlehem, exhorting them to be witnesses of God with us. I'm Lydia O'Kane.
The bishops of the European Union are saying that European institutions should consult more with churches and other religious communities. They argue that proposed norms for dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic interfere with freedom of religion and belief. Francesca Merlo tells us more.
The statement comes shortly after the last meeting of the Standing Committee of the Commission of the Bishops' Conferences of the European Union, COMESE, on Tuesday the 15th of December, in which the bishops also addressed the European Commission on their strategy Staying Safe from COVID-19 During Winter, published on the 2nd of December. The bishop strategy, entitled It is Crucial to Maintain Dialogue with the Churches, stresses that while welcoming the efforts for a coordinated and sustainable EU approach against the current pandemic, COMESE urges the European institutions to consult with churches and religious communities, especially when considering recommendations that have an impact on religious matters. Regarding the strategy Staying Safe from COVID-19 During Winter, COMESE recalls the commitment enshrined in Article 17 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, TFEU. In this context, reads the statement, consulting with churches and religious communities when references that also concern religious matters are being considered in EU documents is particularly crucial. The bishop stressed that the European Commission's document highlights the importance of avoiding large services or using online TV or radio broadcasts in case of ceremonies and banning of communal singing. In response to this, the bishops state that while understanding the concern behind the recommendation, COMESE cannot support the method for which the EU institutions opted in providing such an orientation. Supporting this, they highlight that Article 17.1 TFEU underlines the exclusive national competence for determining the relations between church and state and the non-interference of the EU in these relations. The lack of EU competence, states Father Manuel Manuel Barrios Prieto, General Secretary of COMESE, should be a reason more for the EU institutions to involve religious authorities when considering non-binding recommendations on matters related to religious celebrations in full respect of freedom of religion. In their statement, the bishops reiterate the message addressed to the EU member states on behalf of all EU bishops' conferences, which stresses that the respect for the freedom of religion of believers in full respect of sanitary requirements is a crucial element for the Church in many EU member states during the current pandemic. Finally, the statement reads that non-binding EU recommendations on this matter, especially if taken without consulting with churches and religious communities, may put at risk the efforts made in these recent months by EU member states, together with local churches and religious communities, to ensure that health measures are in place during celebrations while avoiding violations of freedom of religion. I'm Francesca Merlo.
Earlier today, COMESE General Secretary Father Manuel Barrios Prieto, whom Francesca just mentioned, reiterated the need for constant dialogue between the EU Commission and the various institutions that represent the wide spectrum of realities that make up the European Union, especially with regard to policies concerning the life of the Church and of the faithful.
COMESE would also like that when orientations are given that have to do with the life of the Church and with liturgical celebrations, with ceremonies, these recommendations are put forward in dialogue with the churches. I think this is very important. Churches are the ones that are competent for their celebrations, the ones that know how the celebrations take place. So I think trying to maintain an open dialogue, a regular dialogue, a transparent dialogue between the EU institutions and the churches, well, this has to be respected mainly in these situations when orientations are given that have to do with the life of the Church.
What would you suggest could be the best way to both contain the spread of the virus and respect the rights of the people?
Well, the way of dialogue. Dialogue is what is fundamental. We have to respect sanitary prescriptions, sanitary norms to avoid the spread of the virus, to try and fight against this virus. But we also have to try to not go against fundamental rights. And the right of freedom of religion, the right to celebrate, to live one's own religion is fundamental. And therefore we have to keep the two things together. Respect sanitary norms, but sanitary norms that also try to not go against fundamental rights. And this is a difficult balance, and this should be done in dialogue with churches and religious associations. And this dialogue is something that is prescribed by the treaties of the European Union.
That was COMESE General Secretary Father Manuel Barrios Prieto, speaking with Vatican Radio. In Nigeria, hundreds of schoolboys who were abducted last week in the northwest part of the country have been freed. A state official confirmed that the over 300 schoolboys were missing for nearly a week after an attack on a secondary school in Katsina State. They were rescued by the Nigerian military late on Thursday. None were harmed. A government spokesman said the boys had been received at the state capital and that extremist Boko Haram militants were not involved. Vatican Radio spoke with Archbishop Ignatius Kaigama of Abuja, who welcomed the news, as well as that of the liberation in separate kidnappings of two Catholic priests, Father Matthew Dajo, who was held captive for 10 days, and Father Valentin Iziugo, who was released the day after he was abducted while on his way to his father's funeral. However, Archbishop Kaigama pointed out, these are just the latest in a series of kidnappings in Nigeria. He called for the government and the international community to increase efforts to protect the lives of Nigerian citizens.
Well, the good news is that all of them have been liberated. My priest in Abuja, Archdiocese, Father Valentin also, and then there's over 300 boys from a school. So, but the disturbing thing is that this has become a trend. This has become like normal, like a culture where one should expect that bandits or kidnappers or whoever they are, whatever criminal group they belong to would come at any time, day or night. This is not acceptable. My priest was kidnapped when he was at home, 9:30 p.m. He wasn't out on the road, he wasn't in the bush, but they came for him at home. So it means that it is deliberate and calculated, and then they get away with it. The authorities need to sit up Unfortunately, we don't seem to see that happening. It's quite embarrassing and shameful that the news from Nigeria always is about these kidnappings and killings and so on. We keep appealing to the authorities to do the needful. And we keep praying to God also to assist us because He is the optimal security that we have. We can't depend on human security. And then we keep also hoping that the international community will also give a helping hand, whether it is to deal with Boko Haram or kidnappers or bandits or militant herdsmen. I think we need some concerted efforts of the Nigerian authority and the international community to bring these criminal activities to an end so that Nigerians can have peace and celebrate their lives, celebrate Christmas peacefully and happily, and live in great tranquility.
Are you particularly worried about what might happen at Christmas time?
Yes, it's a delicate season. Even without the kidnappers and bandits and so on, Christmas is usually a busy period, and we worry quite a lot. And now that the kidnappers are on the prowl and the bandits operate freely and just take the laws into their hands, it's very, very worrisome.
That was Archbishop Ignatius Kagama of the city of Abuja in Nigeria. He was speaking with Francesca Sabatinelli of Vatican Radio. Finally, today, December 18th, is International Migrants' Day. In a message for the occasion, United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said that migrants are integral to our societies and should be central in the world's response to and recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. He also said they should be ensured access to social services and not left behind. Robin Gomes tells us more.
Observed every year on December the 18th, International Migrants' Day was established by the United Nations General Assembly in December 2000, urging full respect for the human rights and fundamental freedoms of all migrants. The theme of this year's observance is Reimagining Human Mobility. In a message for the occasion, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres noted that in the midst of the global pandemic, societies have come to appreciate their dependence on migrants who are too often invisible within our communities. Migrants, he pointed out, have played an outsized role on the front lines of responding to the crisis, from caring for the sick and elderly to ensuring food supplies during lockdowns. Just as migrants are integral to our societies, they should remain central to our recovery, he said. We must reject hate speech and acts of xenophobia, he urged, calling for solutions for those migrants who have been left stranded without income or legal status and without means to return home. On this International Migrants' Day, Guterres urged, let us seize the opportunity of the recovery from the pandemic to implement the Global Compact for safe, orderly and regular migration, reimagine human mobility, enable migrants to reignite economies at home and abroad, and build more inclusive and resilient societies. Antonio Vitorino, Director General of the UN's International Organization for Migration, IOM, also regarded migrants as champions of resilience when times are tough, saying they will be key to return to normal life as the world moves from pandemic response to recovery. But for this to happen, he said, we must reinforce the efforts to ensure migrants are fully included in our COVID-19 responses, including access to social services and ensuring they are not left behind. I'm Robin